y'all can join with me for prayer. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for these days we have and the opportunities that we have. We'd ask your blessing on this group that's assembled here and be with us as we decide things in behalf of Chatham County. Amen. Amen. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, all to order. And Kim, do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The agenda and anybody need to add anything or take anything away from the agenda? Like it is. Now on the minutes of the last meeting and February 3rd meeting, I guess, already the third month. There's a couple of corrections that we need to make, Kim. One of them is, correction, down there where we appointed the two subcommittees, Caroline and Barbara were on the Lucier committee.
Okay.
And then afterwards, Stacy is on the elder. Any other corrections or additions or subtractions from the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Our motion is made to approve the minutes. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. Hi, Stacy. Hello. How are you? Kim, did anybody sign up to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You call their name and come up to the podium and state your name, please. And we'll try to limit everyone's comments to about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Number one.
First person we have up will be Tommy Glosson.
Thank you. I'm Tommy Glosson. I live in Hadley Township. My address is 738 Mount Olive Church Road, Pittsburgh. And I've made a few notes, but I have a lot of history. In fact, I'm over 80 years old. And I went on the planning board 38 years ago when Chatham had the first 11-member board. And of course I stayed there 6 years. I was chairman for 3 years. And that's when Farrington was started. It was in the second phase. And the same people threatened then to take him to court. They're still living. Starkweather had a newspaper. And he was the ringleader. They were going to sue him, stop it, do all that kind of good stuff. And then I've come to speak against zoning. And by the way, I need to tell you folks, I'm a Democrat now. Been a lifelong registered Democrat. And I want to speak against zoning. In my neighborhood, this is my neighbor here, I've added his land. I've counted 1,300 acres. And there's a subdivision up there, 187 acres. There's 17 residents in it. And I've counted 30 residents. And that figures out to over 40 acres per resident. And what I'm saying, why would the county, or you folks, want to zone that, spend county money? And of that 1,300 acres, I didn't ask my neighbor, but he's opposed to zoning. He has a timber farm. And my farm's a timber farm. There's around 1,000 acres of that is timber farm. his neighbor and my neighbor has 100 acres in the CRP. It won't be developed. I have 30 acres that won't be developed for 30 years. I won't be around to see it end, but I do get to manage the timber. And the last soil survey I saw was of Chatham County. There's just 71%. The 71% of that soil will not support septic systems. And if my arithmetic is right, that's 29% that can be for septic systems. And even in our area, we have a hard time finding some land that would perk. And we have, Chatham County has more regulations than the adjoining counties. They have a higher water rate. I don't know why in the last few years people have considered well water poison. I have 3 on my property. I've had it tested. And might be what's wrong with me. I've drunk it for 50-some years. Anyway, we have never asked for county-wide water. I hope we never need it. And like I say, we have a subdivision regulation that if you have a land survey, it goes before at least 3 different organizations. And I tell them it goes for everything except the church choir to sign off on it. And there was a few years ago, we had a developer here. We talked about changing the zoning regulation. I came down, and he was from Lee County, and he says in Chatham, to go through your subdivision regulations. I didn't ask him was they lying. I had no reason to. Said it'll take about 18 months. In the adjoining counties, he said I can do it in 30 days. And I feel like that is sufficient. I really don't think the county should spend money to zone our area out there. And I haven't heard what the cost would be, but it will be a cost to zone it. And I have some friends that will probably speak sometime or other. One of them over around Harper's Crossroads, they have 1,500 acre farm. And I asked him the other night, didn't he want it zoned? He said, no way. There's all in cropland and pasture. And I really am opposed to the zoning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next, Kim.
We have Tommy Emerson.
Thank you all for the opportunity. Please give me a 1-minute warning. I've come to speak on the proposed zoning also. As y'all realize, farming is a difficult and challenging enterprise for anybody. Farmers aren't in control of markets, they aren't in control of weather. It's a high-risk business even when it's well managed. Many farmers struggle throughout their lifetime and their estate is quite significant, primarily because of the appreciation in the value of the real estate they're able to hold on to. My fear is that the zoning of agricultural land in western Chatham, where you limit it only to agriculture, will ultimately erode the net worth of the Chatham County farmer. As a former appraiser, Federal Land Bank Appraiser 252, you appraise a property for its highest and best use. If you have to go back and limit that property to agricultural use only, in my opinion, it's going to devalue the real estate. Of course, that is going to be an impediment to the farmer because appreciation in the value of the real estate is an incentive for them to continue to farm. But if it can't be sold for anything but farming, it will not be appraised at its current value. This may negatively also impact the county because it may impact your tax revenue from lower property values. Now, Tommy's mentioned cost. This is a humongous county, as y'all all realize. What is it? Nearly 50 miles across, 707 square miles. I assume that the present planning department staff is well staffed, but I guarantee you, if you take on what you're talking about taking on, it will increase staff. Got 1 minute? All right, thank you. So the point I make, we've got by without zoning in our section of the county for what, 230 some odd years. Don't rush into this. I think you need to give it very careful consideration. And we got by that long, I think we can get by a while longer if we need to. And whatever you do, keep the farmer in mind, because they are the backbone of western Chatham County. We are a depressed economic area. The town of Siler City has lost 11 industries since the year 2000, and we don't need to put the farmers out of business. I appreciate your time. Thank y'all.
Next.
Have Jim Vanderbeck.
Good evening. I'm concerned about the zoning as well. We have many rules and ordinances already. I doubt that anyone is an expert, except if they happen to work in a department that focuses on that. And I think it's, I guess based on the Goat House Gallery gun range situation, somehow that managed to get resolved. I don't know that it was the right way to do things, but I think that was in an unzoned area. I don't know that it needed zoning to get resolved. But my biggest concern is similar to the speakers before me. I have a small tree farm of 112 acres that I've been nurturing for about 20 years now. Quite a few years ago, I lost about 10% of my trees in an ice storm. I plant every year no less than 50 trees to as much as 2,000. It may sound like a lot. It gets used up pretty fast on the land. 2,000 trees is not a lot to infill and take care of things. I hope that I won't have to sell my land. My plan is not to, but as most of you know, we don't control a good part of what happens in our life. My land is my retirement. I would suspect that many of you have 401ks or retirement plans of some sort. My land is my retirement. If you change the value of that land, and my wife and I need that land, that money, I want to be able to get it. I hope that'll never happen. But I have enough experience to know that I don't know the future. That's my protection. You have yours. I need mine. Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Esther Cohen.
Good evening. My name is Esther Cohen. I reside on Van Thomas Road in Pittsburgh. As you know from my previous appearances here, I chair the Chatham County Ag Advisory Board. When I came before you previously, it was in response to the zoning proposals that were presented by the Planning Board last June to the BOC. Back then, when I was in front of the Planning Board, I really just spoke to introduce myself and to remind everyone that the county does have an Ag Advisory Board. Sometimes farmers get seen as background and get forgotten as we mostly mind our own business. Chatham County is made up of a lot of farmland and a lot of farmers, and we simply ask for a voice in any future zoning discussions back when I came before the Planning Board. At that time, I had nothing specific to request, but this time I do. On behalf of the Ag Advisory Board, I would like to request that any zoning proposals affecting agriculture are presented for discussion to the Agriculture Advisory Board before being sent on to the BOC. Let me state, it is not a lot to ask. And let me state, as I have previously, that we look forward to working with both the Planning Board and the BOC on those county issues that will affect agriculture.
We have Sonny Kiesler.
My name is Sonny Kiesler. I live at 3006 River Forks Road. I'm here to encourage the Planning Board to proceed with efforts to zone all of Chatham County and to develop a first-class land use plan and map. I'll highlight 2 reasons why this should be done. First, good zoning and land use planning act as a magnet that pulls in wealth. For example, those areas in Chatham County that are zoned and have the best land use plans are the wealthiest areas in Chatham County. The land use planning I refer to includes both public land use plans and private plans involving subdivision governments. As a former real estate developer who developed high-end, large lot subdivisions such as Monterey, I know from first-hand experience that people with money who want to move to Chatham County from Cary, Chapel Hill, San Francisco, and elsewhere, demand good zoning and good land use planning that protects both their real estate investment and the natural environment that still makes Chatham County an attractive place to live. In a similar manner, we only have to look at various towns and cities in our parts of North Carolina. When you do, you will see that those towns that are the most prosperous, such as Cary and Chapel Hill, have much better zoning and much better land use planning than poor communities such as Sanford and Siler City. The reason for this is simple. People with money demand good zoning and land use planning. On a personal level, I live in the Rocky River corridor, where land 1/2 mile on each side of the river is restricted to 5-acre lots with 3-acre minimums. It is only because this land was restricted that I invested over $1,250,000 in my house and land. A second reason why you should zone the county involves 21st century realities, the most important of which is the fact the natural environment that has supported civilization for over 10,000 years is collapsing before our very eyes. For example, atmospheric carbon dioxide now is the highest level it has been in 800,000 years. The oceans are becoming acidic faster than they have in approximately 55 million years. And if we continue burning carbon-based fuels at the rate we now are, by 2100 the Earth will be hotter than it has been in approximately 65 million years. In short, if we are going to preserve a habitable planet, we must overhaul how we live and how we work. And at the local level, this means we must enact first-class land use plans that will protect not only economic investments, but also what is left of God's creation, including the monarch butterfly that now is headed towards extinction. Thank you.
Rain Sears.
My name's Wayne Sears, and Billy Elkins and I started a company 22 years ago named Tar Hill Land and Timber. We own over 1,000 acres of timberland in Chatham County. Well, us and the bank together own over 1,000 acres of timberland, I should say. But I was in agreement with everybody up here till this last gentleman spoke, and obviously he's a lot better educated than I am in a lot of ways. But I'm gonna tell you something, Chatham County was a much nicer place 42 years ago when I moved here than it is today. And as far as the high rent district and people wanting big zoner and all, a lot of the suitable land in this county is already developed. Not all of it by any means. But my problem is, I have a serious issue with somebody living on a 1/4 acre lot in a fancy subdivision telling me what to do with my 1,000 acres of timberland. We're good stewards of the land. We're both pro-logger certified. We use consulting foresters, get a lot of information from them. We look after our land, leave wide buffers on the streams, everything within the state rules, Forest Service regulations and all. And I understand that 3 of the county commissioners voted to do away with having any community meetings and all about this. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong. I understand Mr. Cross and Mr. Petty didn't like it. But you need to talk to the people that own this land. Don't talk to people from up here in the subdivision office. Talk to these people over at Golden, Bonnelly, Denton. People like us that work the land, trying to make a living off the land. And I'm like one of these gentlemen said, this is a lot of my retirement. I'll be 64 years old this year. And when things are going well, I work 50 and 60 hours a week every week. I don't punch the clock nowhere. I get up and go every day. But on another note, some of our land car rent, by our wonderful luck, I guess, going to clay hole where Duke Energy gonna dump their toxic coal ash, I guess. And what's that gonna do to land values down there? Our land may never bring again what we paid for. My son will never see what we paid for that land. And that's what that's gonna do for a lot of the Brickhaven community down there. The World heirs and the Mansfield heirs and the Dickens heirs, those people that own land down there, I don't think y'all have a clue what it's gonna do to land values in that area. Now, we bought it to grow trees, and that's fine, but some of my heirs or Mr. Elkins heirs one day may need to sell that land. But y'all need to really think about it when y'all doing this stuff, like these first few people spoke. You are impacting the financial well-being of the people that own that land. I'd much rather have a shooting range or chicken houses or most anything next door to my forest land than another subdivision or golf course. I cut timber all the time, not every week, but all too often, several times a year. We're cutting tracts of timber next to a subdivision. People see me out there flagging property lines, they come across out, don't blame me. I'm a very diplomatic person. What are you doing? I explain it to them. I'm wearing an orange vest, and I'm hanging things here, flagging lines, gonna cut the timber. Well, why are you gonna cut the timber? I said, well, the people that own it, that sold it, we bought it, we're gonna cut it. Well, we like looking at the trees. I said, it's not your trees. Where you gonna leave a buffer? I said, where's your buffer? I'm getting ill with it. They cleared their land to the line. What trees they have, they rake their leaves and throw them on the neighbor. They throw the dead bicycles on the neighbor. They throw the Christmas trees over there. You ought to have to leave a buffer. I said, where's your buffer? Well, we got to walk in these woods. I said, this is private property. It's not posted. I said, it don't matter. It's private property. Well, it's not posted. This one lady in particular. Could have been a man, had to be a lady. I said, you don't even have blinds or curtains in your back window. Looks like their den was in the back of the house. Beautiful home. I said, how do you feel? You get up Sunday morning, walk around in your night clothes, drink your cup of coffee, and I'm wandering around your property because I think it looks nice and want to walk on it. What you think was that? But please think about this. Please recommend to the county commissioner to slow down and talk to the people that own this land. There's no rush. If we've got about 230-something years, another 6 months, another year doesn't matter. But you need to get information and need to get input from the people that own the land. Don't let the people in the northwest section of this county run the rest of us in the ground. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. But we don't
We need to keep our comments down to about 3 minutes. Let him go because he's kind of interested.
Well, I'm better at making a short story long than long.
I like this story.
Now, where's this lady's glass window at?
There have been so many of those. That is not a lie, I didn't make that up. We have connected to so many subdivisions and so many homes where they built in the middle of the country, with timberland all around it. And I understand why people like looking at the trees, but if it's not your trees, you shouldn't try to control it. At least that's my answer.
You have other speaker, Ken? That's it? All right. We'll move on then to the first item on the agenda. Request by legacy owner for subdivision preliminary plat approval, legacy phase 4A1. And I guess that's you, Lynn.
It is. This is a request for preliminary plat approval of the legacy phase 4A1. Consists of 32 lots on 11.66 acres. It's located off Big Woods Road, Williams Township. You have 3 attachments in your packet. The zoning of this property is R1 with a conditional use permit for planned unit development for a cluster, to cluster the homes closer together and have open space. It's within 3 different watershed districts, the WS4 protected, WS4 critical, and the Jordan Lake buffer area. The water service will be public Chatham County water. Sewer is a private wastewater treatment plant. The roads will be private paved roads. And this is reviewed under the pre-08 subdivision regulations. So to give you a brief history, Legacy was approved in 2004 as a planned unit development for to cluster the homes. And then modifications were made in 05 to add 50.5 acres and then to actually reduce the number of lots to 463 lots. So that's what we have today, a project that has 463 lots on 626 acres with an amenity center. In 2011, the developer at the time submitted a request to the Board of Commissioners to relinquish the final plat approvals for phases 2 and 3, which were undeveloped at the time. And he wanted to recombine the phases back, just do away with the lots and recombine those phases back with the bigger property and take those lots back to their preliminary plat stage, which is what was approved. So the board approved that in 2011, and there's a copy of that resolution online, and you have the recording information there. The recreation fees and the water availability fees that had been paid at that time were to be retained by the county and could be credited towards any similar project for the legacy up until December 31st, 2015. If they're not used by that time, they'll expire, but they'll be used before that, I expect. So the status of the project today, as I have listed there, phase 1 and 2 has final plat approval. 3 has a preliminary plat approval. Phases 4, 5, and 6 have sketched plan approval. And then as a part of a 2014 CUP revision, the final plat sunset date for all phases is December 31st, 2020. And this layout that you see before you does conform to the 2014 revision. So again, preliminary plat for 32 lots, 11.66 acres. The roadways will be private, 50-foot wide right-of-ways. They'll be paid to the DOT standard but not reviewed and approved by DOT. There will be sidewalks provided. The other agency permits that are required for preliminary plat approval are listed in your packet there. Your water main extension, the authorization to construct the water system, the wastewater collection system extension, the erosion control permit are all listed there. There are no historical structures, buildings, chimneys, or fences, or cemeteries within this phase. There is a cemetery I have listed there, that E84.1, that is shown partially located in phase 3. So that will come before the board at a later date. It looks like it's partly located on the legacy property and partly located on the adjoining property owner's property. So Bev Wiggins with the Historical Association, she will want to go out and know the history behind that. The road names, Legacy Club Drive, Sweetbriar Lane, Village Walk Drive, have been reviewed by the Emergency Operations and approved for submittal to the Board of County Commissioners for approval. Mark Ashton is the engineer of the project, updated the conditional use permit stipulations, and that was part of your packet. There are no water features as far as creeks or streams or wetlands within this phase. Tom Vendor, Fire Marshal, reviewed the roadways for emergency access, and he said that the width of the right-of-ways and the proposed width of the cul-de-sacs, whenever they are built, are adequate for emergency vehicle access. The Technical Review Committee, which is a staff review committee, met. Mark Ashton was there. There were a few questions, nothing of concern. There was a question about placement of water lines, and Mr. Ashton stated that there is a 10-foot wide utility easement shown on the plat for placement of the water meters, and that the water lines are installed within the private road right-of-ways. So there were no other questions. And the plat does meet the requirements of the subdivision regulations. The planning department recommends granting approval of road names, Legacy Club Drive, Sweetbriar Lane, and Village Walk Drive, and approval of the request for preliminary plat review of the Legacy Phase 4A1 as submitted. I'm sure Mark is here. Oh, there he is. Just look right over you, Mark. I'm sorry. So if you have questions, engineer is here. You may have a Jason copy on it.
Okay. The way our process works, are there questions for Lynn first, or members of the board?
All the county water lines are in easements, public easements,
Private.
private easements.
Well, the
They're
water
in
lines,
private road, but I would assume they're public.
there will be an easement over those water lines for installation and maintenance purposes, yes. Yes.
And we're working between now and the final plat, we'll work on the final language of the wording of the easement.
Yours?
When this was approved, my recollection was that it was a gated community. Is that not true now when it changed hands?
We haven't talked to anyone about it being gated. Mark might can update us on that, but they are private roads, so if they wanted to gate them, they would be allowed to do so.
Good evening, board members and staff. See a lot of familiar faces up here. Certainly a lot of people with a lot of
Just a minute,
experience.
Mark, so we get all the questions to Lynn, and then we'll let you talk.
It is, there's a gate at the entrance. I know over time it's been sometimes left open, and then sometimes, I guess depending on the HOA maintenance, it is sometimes closed,
When
so.
they close it.
Close at night,
open it during the day.
I have a couple other questions. I also recall there was some talk, and I might be confusing it with a windfall, of connecting Hatley Road to Big Woods Road.
That's
through one of the
windfall.
subdivisions.
That was discussion with the windfall developer.
Yeah, okay, so that was not
Not here.
Correct.
here.
Yes.
But out of matter of curiosity, did that ever go anywhere?
Not yet, not yet. They still have a project on Hatley Road that is still valid, so we'll see where that goes.
Does this connect into the preserve?
The,
Finish your,
Okay.
yeah, you got the floor.
the third question is on the, when 50 acres were added in 2005, that didn't change the number of lots, or did it?
I think it reduced the number of
That's
lots.
my
There were
recollection, used to be
21
more.
lots that the board requested be reduced out of the critical area watershed.
Yeah, that was my recollection, it was close to 500, and now it's 463.
Yes.
And the last question is, what does it mean when you say that, what does that sunset date mean?
That's the date that all phases will have to be submitted to the board for review and approval, or if they're not submitted by that date, the permit expires. The
So it
approval
has up through
expires.
the final plat approval?
I'm sorry for
Up
that.
through final plat approval?
Right, they'd have to have final plat approval by this date on all phases.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I guess, is there a connection into the preserve? Does it?
I can speak to that when you're ready.
There's not a public, not a access, not a, there's a
Lynn,
emergency access.
this is the same issue we had before, and they we made a few changes to this before we got back.
I'm sorry, ask me that again.
We had this before when we had some discussion about access to a common area and all. It's all been resolved.
That was resolved, the amenity area was left, in the original location.
Hope that whole question got resolved back.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I still, excuse me, BJ.
Oh, you're not done? Oh, excuse me. I thought you were.
So this is going to be under the 2003 lighting ordinance. That's what it says here, 2003 county lighting guidelines.
Which is basically the current.
The current, it is the current.
It's nominal changes. The street lighting will have to comply with, I'm assuming whether energy providing, which complies with our requirements.
And I guess I have another question. I kind of pulled up the old environmental impact assessment, and in that it stated that 50% of the development would be in open space. Is that still the truth?
Yes, actually, the plans we just submitted last summer and went through sort of a rigorous review last fall, some of the lots actually shrunk. So this particular phase here is similar to what we originally had in that area. It's right up near the roundabout if you've been in there. But some of the future phases that you'll see later this spring that we're going to bring in, phase 5, those lots went from like 110 feet wide to 75 feet wide. And the depth of the lots also shrunk. And that, we didn't add any more lots, we just made more open space. So actually the plan today that got approved back in December has more open space than the original plan.
Any other question for Lynn? Bill?
This may be irrelevant, but I'm just not sure I understand it. They relinquished final plat approvals for phases 2 and 3, recombined them, revert to their approved preliminary status. And now we're talking here about phase 4. I don't get what the relationship is, and I guess the bottom line I'm asking about, is this higher density than was planned before, or?
No, it's not. It's the same number of lots that were originally approved. Phase 2 and 3 did receive final plat approval, but then economy took a downturn, so the developer asked for those 2 phases to be basically taken off the books, and they were reverted back to their preliminary plat status that they had received, I think, in '06. Phases 4, 5, and 6 had not received preliminary plat approval at that time. That's why I didn't mark. That's
Yes.
my recall. So 4, 5, and 6 will come to you for preliminary plat review, where 2 and 3, well, 2's already received final plat approval. Phase 3 can go to final plat approval because it already has its preliminary plat approval. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
The original developer is not part of the picture. There are
Yeah.
2 new developers in the subdivision, so other phases were purchased by one developer, and then different phases have been purchased by this developer.
but when it reverted to the original plan, what was the difference between what they relinquished and what the original plan was in terms of density, is what I'm asking.
I think I can answer that in a way. I think I understand what you're asking, Bill, is basically Capital Bank took over the property, and they basically took phase 2 and 3 at that time out of final plat because they were able to take some bonds back and recoup those. It was really more of a business decision. Then Meritage bought phase 2 and went through the whole process, and they're actually built final plat for that area. Phase 3, really phase 1, 2, and 3, the lot sizes and the widths are similar, pretty homogeneous through all of those phases. So the new developer, when they came in and they bought phase 3 also, and they bought the balance of the project. So Meritage really only bought phase 2. So they're a home builder, and Freehold, which bought the rest of the community, is really a developer. They said, even though sequentially you would think you would do phase 3 after 2, it's the same size lots. So their objective was to create some diversity in the community, get some other builders to come in addition to Meritage. So phase 4 was always permitted at the size lots that you see right now. So they wanted to get phase 4 going and you'll see Phase 5 in a month or so, which is a 75-foot wide lot. They wanted to create sort of 3 product types in the community, get a little more energy. You have different buyer expectations between a 60-foot lot, a 75-foot lot, and a 100-foot lot. And there's still plenty of lots in Phase 2 and even scattered in Phase 1 at 100 feet. So it was really kind of just a, so I think Phase 3 will come, but it'll come after 4 or 5. But the lot size in 3 is really the same generally as what you had before in terms of lot width.
They'll be bigger than this.
That's right, yep.
Okay.
Other questions for Lynn? Okay. Now, do you have questions specific? You had one, Joe.
I had one on the, was whether or not this is still a gated community.
Yes.
I know the first developer
Sure.
had it approved.
It's still a gated community, and right now, the way they could operate it as gated all the time. What they've elected to do is leave it open during the day and then close it at night. And ultimately, I think the homeowners association will make a final decision on whether they want to pay to have a manned presence there all day, or just have it so that it's what I call a day gate type of situation.
It looks like there's probably 60 or 70 more acres in open space than the original 2005 approval. Is that right?
That's right, yep.
That was my.
And that has to do with just, again, creating more, instead of having a bunch of 100-foot wide lots kind of everywhere and just this one section of 60-foot wide lots, now they've got some 100-foot lots, the 60-foot lots, and a new product of 75-foot lots, which gave open space back to the natural. And so basically the roads are similar, it's just the lots got tighter, so more open space occurred along the road, and then the backs of the lots came in, so the periphery that already had meadows in them just got bigger.
Mark.
Other questions for Mark? Jim?
Did you give the fire marshal a key to the gate? Because he sure wasn't happy with you.
Yeah, we took them out to dinner. I shouldn't say that.
Oh, great, it's on the public record.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. There's a.
You must not have any skinny roads in there.
No, they're plenty wide. And there was an earlier question. We do have utility connections with the preserve. The water line in Phase 2 is linked, so that system is looped now. So I think we're in good stead.
Other questions?
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion.
Motion to grant approval or recommend approval for the preliminary plat.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion of that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, Kim. All right. The next item is one that we tabled last meeting to get additional information, and that has to do with the legislative request for proposed county-initiated text amendment to the zoning ordinance Board of Adjustment. So, Hillary, is that you?
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of news with this. The Board of Commissioners meeting that this was going to be discussed at was this past Monday, and the agenda was quite full. And so this, the board had decided to push the discussion of the Board of Adjustment changes to the 16th, the meeting on the 16th during the work session. So we will be bringing that discussion about the Board of Adjustment, composition, setup, membership, and all the pointed questions that this board had on the 16th during the work session. So we intend to bring that back the following planning board meeting. A couple other just side items since we're on the subject. As we mentioned before, when we first presented this, we did have a good conversation with our attorney, a continuing conversation on this text change. And the question regarding referencing other ordinances within the Section 18 draft language, it was determined that you could include references to those ordinances within the Section 18, or it can simply be referenced by just the statutory reference as well. And all of the ordinances this text refers to, like the lighting ordinance, the wireless telecommunications facilities ordinance, all have reflective language that refer back to Section 18. So they do cross-reference currently appropriately. However, you could add those specific call-outs for those ordinances in there. Note that it might bring some just technical confusion if other ordinances get updated, but I did want to bring that back to you. Lastly, the statutory language is quite narrow in that it references land use ordinances as to what can go through this particular process. So looking at our scheme of ordinances, the noise ordinance, for example, is not then determined to be an exclusive land use ordinance. So again, the wireless telecom, the junkyard, et cetera, all those can be included, but the noise ordinance was not determined to be within that land use category. So with that, we'll have those questions answered for you after the next meeting of the Board of Commissioners. Again, we wrote them down, how many members are going to be on the board, how's the district going to be set up, where they're appointed from, and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Okay, so we should move this to the next
That's right.
meeting
Yes, please.
and remind ourselves that this is as far as we can go. We're gonna have to make some kind of decision next meeting. So, we're behind the clock now. So, all right, we move that to the, what would that be, April meeting?
7th, April 7th.
Yeah, okay. All right, any new business? Okay, hearing none, the planning director's report.
Only item I have is the minor subdivision list. We can't hand that out tonight. It just shows the update since last month. That's all I have.
Now, we need to go to the subcommittee reports. Which one of you guys want to go first?
All right, the land use subcommittee, I enclosed the draft of some notes we took at the meeting, and unfortunately, we met one of those bad, right after the last snow and the ice, and some of our members couldn't make it. The goal of this subcommittee is to prepare an RFQ, a request for qualifications for a consultant to come in and help us prepare a comprehensive plan for the county. And we talked about basically elements of the plan, the different parts of the plan. The first one being the horizon year. The horizon year is the year you kind of look at in a plan, and I think we settled on 2040 as a good horizon year because they take a census in that year and you can compare where you are against the census and stuff like that. You can compare where your growth is in that period of time. Also, I think there's a DOT plan on that same horizon or close.
It's close, yeah.
So you want to pick a plan horizon that kind of fits with other things going on. Because the DOT in North Carolina is the road guys. So the county has no road jurisdiction, so we have to listen to what the DOT's doing. We also, next thing, anybody else want anything on horizon here? That's probably kind of boring, huh? The second part is the study approach and whether to go with an area approach, and we had a map of 5 areas that could be done in the county, or a topical approach. And I think we came in on a hybrid of those. Now, what you would do in this hybrid would, you would take a task force, and we were looking at 4 task force, an environmental task force, an agricultural task force, an economic development task force, and an infrastructure task force, and they would go through the plan and come up with their recommendations on the plan, and then we would take it, the task force, 4 or 5 meetings, maybe more, to get through all the stuff here, and then we would take the recommendations there, plus the background studies, and I'll get to that in a minute, out to open houses in the county and get comments on them. We did that very similar thing up there in that Cary Chatham plan, where the consultant comes and you look at the maps and you talk about them, and we're gonna hold several open houses on those plans. The first part of the study is what's called background study, and Chatham is lucky that they have a lot of information, but it isn't terribly pulled together in one place, and one of the things you do here is pull it together. And so background studies, we would like to get all that stuff, a series of maps and stuff in the background studies, like coal mines, geology. Be nice to know where this fracking area is and where the gas deposits are. Historic vegetation that's been here and still here. Floodplains and watershed, we have a lot of maps on that. Air quality, I didn't even know we had air quality non-attainment in parts of the county. And the land use subdivisions and districts, and we were talked about a special study of the 15501 corridor, just to make sure the decisions in that corridor are with what we need to do. It's been developed pretty hard already. Then you pull in all the transportation plans from DOT, and there's a lot of them. And then you pull in utilities. We have to do two things here. One was the water. We have water maps, water lines and stuff, but sewer, we have a lot of private sewer companies, and I think we need to invite them and find out if they got any more capacity. They may build a treatment plant that has more capacity and can serve more customers. We need to know that. We can't make anybody use that, but we need to know it. And cell towers, and then economic base, the mega sites, Chatham Park. Part of the area around Chatham Park is no land use plan at all. So that's part of what you do in the background studies. Then you go and go back. Here's what we got, and you make a plan and draft a plan, and then you're going to go back out, more open houses, and then you go forward with adopting a plan. You make the recommendation. So that's what we talked about. Next month, we hope to get a draft RFQ, which incorporates all of this into one document that the consultants would look at and say, okay, we think we can do this, and they would send their qualifications in. Poor Hillary and Jason got to sort out that and give us about 3 to talk to. And I'm hoping the board will appoint a committee of maybe 5 to interview the consultants and recommend a consultant for doing the plan. And that's pretty much as far as we got. Anything to add to that? Okay, that's our report, Mr. Chairman. Next month, we hope to come back with a draft
Of the RFQ.
of the RFQ. Not a draft of anything else. What?
Got questions here?
How much of this estimated cost you have of $250,000, how much of that is for consulting?
All of it.
Wow.
What's the most that Chatham County has ever spent on any consultant?
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh,
I can't remember, I mean.
you're talking about planning consultant, engineer, architect?
If you have the answer to any one of those, that'd be, I mean, that's a good starting point.
Do you remember what we spent on architect for the Ag Center? That's the only one I remember recent.
It's, you know, probably the best way of dealing with that is just ask Renee. rather
Okay,
than have us
yeah,
guess.
I don't know. We're guessing.
Brian, you have a question or comment?
I got, Joel, just one. How, you know, there've been several plans done in the last 6 or 7 years on various things. There's a farmland protection plan that actually the Ag Advisory Board did. There was a strategic plan for economic development. And there's a land conservation plan that a number of groups have put together 5 or 6 years ago. There's the recent activities and by the Economic Development Corporation on coming up with a map and so forth of economic development. Of course, you mentioned the DOT map. It's going to be important for the consultant to have access to all of those in their final form.
Yeah, all of it is, pretty much all of it's on the internet, first of all. But in the RFQ, you will, I hope you will see, when we get it done, that those plans will be cited. Here are resources for you to go to. So all those plans will be in there, including census, geologic survey, all these environmental agencies at the state, all that resource places that are available. And I'm sure that Hillary and Jason know a whole lot more than I do. They got them on their shelf in the back of them. And we'll try to get those resources cited so those consultants can see what's available. And the hardest part of that is boiling it down. Because there's a lot. I read some of them, and there's a lot.
Jim, I'm concerned about two or three things. One is early involvement of stakeholders. I mean, you know, get people involved in this process at an early date rather than a later date. And so I think we need to do some more work on how we're going to manage to do that. Somebody brought up the question about, you know, if you have meetings, pretty soon nobody comes to the meetings. You know, so, you know, how are we going to handle that kind of input and make sure we get what people say? The second thing is, what I heard most of these people saying here that spoke earlier tonight, they're concerned about land value of their property. Are there any studies that you know of or any activities that you know of where these kinds of plans have been done, and then future analysis to see how they affected how we, you know, what were the consequences? I mean, I realize that a land use plan is a precursor to nearly anything else you want to do, so you need to have a land use plan.
There are studies.
How does this fit?
There are studies there.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on them by any means, but you can pull them down and we can find out. But there are many, many value studies about, does residential contribute to your coffer or not? In fact, or does industrial, commercial, ag land, all that kind of value stuff, there are people that study that stuff all the time.
And the county has actually done studies on it itself for Chatham County. And what Jim is talking about, if you take residential development, it doesn't quite pay for itself because you have to lay out so much stuff for schools and things like that. So you pay, you pay basically $1.10 for every dollar you get back on the average. You know, some developments are better than others. For commercial activity, the county gets $2 to $3 back for every dollar. That's for every dollar cost the county. So the county actually does well with more commercial development. Agriculture is somewhere in between. You get back about $1.70, $1.80 per dollar. So agriculture is a good investment as well. But residential development is a little under the bar on that.
Well, I just read about a study, and I think it was in Iowa, but where the county went into a land use plan and actually increased the value of agricultural and forest lands. They don't have much forestry now, it was agricultural. And, but.
Only
the key-
down by the creeks.
Yeah, but the key to it was that the agricultural community was heavily involved in the process at the very beginning. And they started out with a kind of a clean slate. And they said, well, what do you want in it? I mean, you know, one fellow here mentioned tonight about having a coal ash hole next to his farm, and what is this going to do to his land value? These kinds of questions need to be built into this process. So I hope your committee will address some of those issues.
Yeah, well, these task forces we're talking about would bring in people from all agriculture, infrastructure, economic development, get the people in who are interested in that.
And
We're
you're talking
hoping,
about doing this on a district basis. Like,
no,
countywide.
countywide on the task forces, then to the district.
I have a question on that. Maybe that should be more clear. What is our task? Is our task to recommend how to do a comprehensive land use plan, or to recommend to do one or not to do one? From what I'm gathering, the decision is made that we need a comprehensive land use plan. And then our task then is to say what's the best way to get there.
Yeah, our task.
So I mean, are we then, should we then just not maybe give recommendations, maybe we do small area land use plans rather than a comprehensive land use plan?
That could be one.
I don't know if that decision's made. I'm trying to figure out what the scope.
That could be one recommendation. I'm with you. I think our task here is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners how they might do this. What's the best process here? And one of them may be on a district by district basis. I don't know.
Because I'm concerned on the cost. I think the 250 is kind of a
Yeah.
pick a number out of the air type of thing.
It's $250,000.
And I think that's low.
That is low.
I think that's going to be a low number. Particularly, we talked about the number of community meetings that will be required. The more community meetings you have, clearly, the more they're going to charge us. So I think we need to get a better handle on what that means, because I think most of us are.
We need to have some idea here about how these steps may occur. It's been my experience that if you do one, then the cost may be $250, just for the sake of argument, $250,000. But if you do 5, it may be $100,000 each. And so the question, you know, how do you balance this kind of thing? Because it may be more cost effective to do a larger land use than it is to smaller. I don't know. I don't know, man. But that's something we ought to think about.
That was one of the things we were talking about, is if you do these task force countywide, you kind of reduce the cost because you have less meetings, and the task force on infrastructure can bring all their expertise to bear on that. The more meetings you have, the more it's going to cost. So if we have the hybrid with the task force and open meetings, several of them all over the county, then that's a compromise between doing 50 meetings and 30 meetings, so to speak. So if we do more meetings, it'll cost more money, for sure.
But on the other hand,
we want citizen participation. So it's a sort of damned if you and damned if you don't, you know, this kind of thing.
the other issue I have is, at the last meeting when we appointed the subcommittees, we also suggested that we have some outside members of these subcommittees, not necessarily from this board. And what concerns me is that we don't have anybody on either of these subcommittees from the western part of the county. And I think that's a very big concern, and we need to do something about remedying that. These subcommittees need to have a broader representation than the northeast section of the county.
Amen.
And I guess, as we're thinking about that, you know, we gotta be careful, we don't just have a token member, and then, you know, 6 to 1, or.
You want to be real careful about that. We don't want a token,
Exactly.
we want a real member.
Or members.
Yeah, well, we're trying to keep these subcommittees down to 7 people or less, but you got plenty of room there.
Yeah, or you can have fewer of us, you know, have 1 or 2 representatives from the planning board,
Yeah,
and the rest of the
yeah.
subcommittee will be made up of the rest of the community.
I mean, there's plenty of room, but I'd be very concerned about token membership. It needs to be real membership. Maybe, you know, some of the folks, some of you folks can help us with that. Some of you may want to serve on one of these subcommittees and try to help us figure this thing out. There's a lot of different interests here, and a lot of different issues here. And we're faced with the questions about coal ash disposal, granite quarries, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so, you know, there's lots of different interests, so we need to have some representation here that will help us accomplish that.
Yeah, I agree. I have talked with Walter Petty. I asked him to nominate someone from District 5. I mean, his 2, Brian and Gene, his 2 appointments to the planning board, neither are from District 5. But I asked Walter if he would nominate someone to serve on my subcommittee from District 5. I've also left a message to Mayor Goldston, Tim Knupp, asking him the same question. And hopefully we'd be able to get someone appointed prior to the March 17th is our next meeting.
Well, I think we need to get that done sooner rather than later.
I agree.
Is the point.
Can we maybe settle tonight how many members would be from the community, and how many planning board members?
We can have at least 2 outsiders, I know. I didn't count them up here, but try to keep these committees down to about 7 people or so you can get something done, but that is not a magic number.
Yes,
That's not a magic
because
number.
we've already appointed Candy Jones from the Agriculture Advisory Committee. And then I'm seeking 1 other additional member from District 5.
So, I mean, this is what we need to do.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to have at least 3. I mean, I'd like to see a majority, but
That'd be all right too. But you know, if we don't involve the real folks here, we're wasting our time.
Exactly.
True.
Carolyn, are you in the unzoned part of the county? So you're in the unzoned. Gene, are you in the unzoned part of the county?
Tell you the truth, I'd have to look at the map because I'm kind of on the edge.
Your zone.
I'm zoned.
We're probably.
Are you stalking me?
Let's get some unzoned folks. Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, I've got some questions. Jim, you mentioned that you're looking at a countywide plan, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, and you're not looking at doing a plan by district, is that correct?
Looking at doing a hybrid with task forces and then open houses.
Okay. If you're looking for a countywide plan, is it safe to say that you and your group assume that the entire county is going to be zoned?
Is that your assumption?
well,
I'm asking a question here.
that is the assumption. We talked about that at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that is, at the end of the day, if you, I thought this was a surprise to some, but at the end of the day, after you do a comprehensive plan, you do the land use, and you do the zoning, or modern land use, whatever you want to call it, to match that.
That's assuming you're going with a countywide
Right,
plan.
right.
If you go with a district plans, that's not a correct assumption necessarily.
What's a district plan?
Again, that's up for discussion. Do you do it by townships? Do you do it by voting districts? Do you do it by zone and unzoned areas? Mr. Tommy Emerson mentioned that Chatham County is one of the biggest counties in the state. I think we're up, again, we can Google it, up around the 10th largest county in the state. So, we can fit several counties into Chatham County, and I would assume that the folks from the western part of the county will tell you that that part of the county is totally different than the eastern part of the county. And that their needs, and I think 5 of the 6 folks expressed their concerns about it. And my concern is that, as BJ mentioned, that we need to make sure that we get input from all portions of the county. I mean, I've been fortunate, my kids have played sports in this county for years. I've been to Bennett, Bonley, Moncure, Golston, and other parts of this county, and each one has distinct needs. I mean, the school board went through this several years ago when they tried to eliminate some of the small schools in those communities. Different communities have different needs. I don't think you can have one full plan for the entire county. Now, if the consultants come along and the feedback that they get from the community says that's what's right for the community, then that's what's right for the community. But I don't think at this point it's fair to say that that's the plan that's going to be the best for the county. I agree with BJ. We need to get input from the different parts of the county.
I mean, I own property in Bennett, for example. I also own property in Bear Creek, and I can guarantee you that talking to my neighbors in those 2 places is different.
But isn't it possible to have to draft a comprehensive land use plan for the entire county that takes into account the different regional differences?
I think that's what we're getting to.
Right.
I think that
I
we're
think
going to
that's
have one
I think that's what we're
overarching
getting
plan.
You know, I expect that's the approach. You have one plan, but it recognizes the regional differences, and it should. I don't think the things are mutually exclusive.
I have another question to show you how dumb I am. Having a comprehensive land plan does not necessarily you have zoning.
We have a land use plan and we don't have zoning.
I know, but the plan we have is so out of date.
It's out of date, but
It doesn't do us any good.
but we've had it since 2001
Yeah.
without zoning.
But I think without the zoning, you don't, I mean, we have a plan, and then we tried to get that map in place now, the strategic land use plan, or that's what I call it, it's called something else. But anyway, it's got the map of where we think, where the farms are, where we want to protect the farms, where we want to have the industry growth. That's on the map now.
Right.
So what would a comprehensive land use plan do other than that, other than put formal zoning in those places? By having the map as a guideline, rather than a formal, everything is zoned to be this way, I think it gives a little flexibility, because as we all know, you're not going to know, you're going to change it in the next 30 years, no matter what we come up with. It's going to change. So, you know, I would prefer to see a guideline rather than something set in stone with all the zoning and everything. And my concern is nothing will ever get done if we try to do comprehensive and then with the expectation that means countywide zoning.
Well, a comprehensive plan is not only land use, it's transportation, utilities, schools, all this other stuff that's gonna have to come up and be folded in there. And you make a decision based on all this stuff, not just one thing.
What if the RFQ specifically set out for the consultants the possibility that they are to consider in a comprehensive plan the potential for unzoned areas, if it makes sense to that overall county view? But I don't think we're in a position saying we must have zoning everywhere. I don't think that's the intent of the RFQ. It's to have a vision that the county works toward.
But I think, again, unless the board decides they don't like the vision that was adopted a couple of years ago, and they may do that. But there is a vision, and there is a map of that vision that has been adopted by the board. Well, it's implemented in the fact that Chatham Park is on there, and it's going to be developed. We're working on the mega site in Siler City. They're working on the big industrial site in Moncure. They've got small land use plan in the eastern part with Cary. So it is being implemented. And when people come to the EDC, or when we try to attract industry, that's what we're using the EDC is using as here's our vision, here's where we could steer you that would be best. But it's also flexible enough that if someone says, well, there's your vision, but it really makes more sense if we locate here, and we don't want to have to go through 18 months of a rezoning process to get there. So I think that was our vision by creating that.
This could incorporate that vision, though, right? That's a very valid background study and initiative that would be folded in and reviewed.
Absolutely. I'm afraid that that's just going to be pushed aside when we start over.
We hired big consultants. Hopefully it won't be pushed aside, but we can incorporate all of the good ideas. And I think that's, maybe I'm not.
And that's what I was trying to say with my question, to try to incorporate all these other plans in existence into it, because a lot of manpower was, and time and energy and thought has gone into those plans, whether it be farmland preservation, the strategic plan for economic development, the conservation plan. All these things need to be integrated well in a comprehensive land use plan, and it just makes a lot of sense that you don't just put something on the shelf and never use it again.
What does it mean, and I don't know the answer to this, what does it mean when we say incorporate the transportation plan, for instance, into the plan? The transportation plans are done, for the most part. DOT kind of dictates a lot of that, but we have all the different organizations that do that for us. And we have the vision that I just talked about. What do you mean by incorporate? Does it mean just staple it together? I don't think that's what you mean.
No,
I'm trying to figure out what it means.
DOT builds an interchange, what do you do around it? You gotta figure out, DOT is not gonna figure out what goes around that interchange. We have to figure that out in the plan. You know.
Well, and we also need to figure out whether we want to be in support of an interchange or not.
That's another thing, yeah.
We may not think an interchange is the best.
Right, well, we had those discussions when we talked about the 164.
Yeah, we had the same, remember, we were talking about the limited access to 64.
Right, and then we argued along with other governments that it wasn't in our best interest to get people through Chatham County as fast as they possibly could get through.
Unless there's another burning question for Jim. Jim, I think the bottom line is you got a whole lot more work to do.
There's a question I have for the board, not necessarily for Jim.
All right.
Question I have, I'm still not clear. Are we asking the citizens' input on whether they want it or whether we need one, or are we asking them now that we have already gone beyond that and we have gone on the assumption that we going to have a plan or zoning, and the only thing we want from them now is their input on how are we going to do this? And what is the question? Because they are coming here thinking that their input is going to make a difference on whether we go forward with this or not. But it sounds like we have already gone beyond that, and we're working on how are we going to do this plan.
Amen.
I think
That would make sense. You know, you're putting the people or wasting their time, making them thinking that their input is making a difference, when all the while we have already gone beyond that.
I think we're at the point, if we have a plan, what do you want in it?
Well, what if we don't want a plan?
DJ,
Yeah.
on the plan portion of it, starting on the plan portion of it, the Board of Commissioners actually formally adopted their goals for the upcoming budget year yesterday. One of the objectives of one of the goals is to have an updated comprehensive plan. So that decision was formally made, but informally that direction was already provided to the departments as far as our budgeting process about probably a month and a
What
half.
we're asking folks is, what do you want to put in there?
That's right.
Okay.
They're asking for an update. They're not asking for you to do anything.
A new one. They're asking for an update, not for a new one.
We're not going to do anything.
Under your definition.
Stop.
Yeah, update would be a new one.
Jason, quick question, is that written in the minutes, or is that available somewhere online?
It was actually attached to the agenda yesterday, and I can read this.
That's the one you sent to us, right?
Don't think I sent this.
Because I love to see that in writing.
Goal number 3, it says, be proactive in protecting natural resources and promoting responsible growth in land use while recognizing the differing needs and factors across the county. Objective, develop and adopt a comprehensive land use plan, including revised land use policy with input from community stakeholders representing all geographic areas. Target timeline to be determined for specific pieces. So that was formally adopted yesterday, but that was provided to the departments probably a month and a half ago as kind of our marching orders for starting to work on our budgets, which we do Monday.
So going on Cecil's question, does that also permit us the possibility of taking the 2001 plan and making changes to that plan without starting from scratch?
Well, actually, the last
We aren't
plan-
starting from scratch anyway. We're taking all these other plans and incorporating them in there. We just said that.
Yeah, Caroline had a floor.
The last planning board did address that, and they actually decided that they really couldn't just go in and patch it up and make, changes here and there. And I think they came to the conclusion, because I was in their subcommittee meeting, that they were going to need to hire consultants, and, it was really going to have to be tackling an entirely new plan. It's very difficult to go in and just change it. I would like to say that on the subject of the meetings, I thought that it was a very good process that you used when you were doing the strategic land use plan, where there were a series of meetings around the county where people came, and it kind of did start out with those questions of, what do you want? What do you care about? How do you see your communities developing over time? And so there was a framework for that. There were the scenarios that were developed and that you adopted. And I wonder if there's any way that we can actually work off of that to some degree.
Visioning is the first step.
Yeah, so
with
that
the
really
committees.
that was done just a couple years ago.
However, you also have a vision that was done in the land use policy plan or whatever, what was that, 15 years ago? You got to pull that in and look at that and then ask the people what other things do they think we ought to be
But
looking
this
at.
visioning was just a couple years ago, I think. I think it was 2012, is that it?
Well, there's a land use policy plan that contains all kinds of goals and visions and stuff. But the first step you always do in a process like this is visioning, and those task forces would get that question right away before anything else.
Okay, let's move on. We hear your report. You got more work to do, and we'll look forward to more enlightenment.
I appreciate it.
George, you got a report?
Yes, I do. I haven't typed it up yet. We'll probably do formal minutes and then transmit them, approve them at the next meeting and then transmit them. We met on February 23rd. We had our 5 members of the planning board were there. We had better weather than you. So we had a full turnout. Bill Arthur was there, Gene Galen, Carolyn Siverson, Barb Ford, and myself. Also, Candy Jones was there. I had asked before that meeting Esther Cohen for a nomination from the Ag Advisory Board, and she suggested Candy Jones. I talked with Candy, and he was interested in representing, obviously, his interest as well as those of the Ag Advisory Board. I also have asked, as I mentioned earlier, to follow up to your question, Mr. Chairman, that a representative, at least one representative from the District 5, and I've asked Walter Petty and Tim Cobb to nominate people who would be appropriate, for that, would be willing to work and serve on my committee. The first thing we talked about was the scope of what our job was. What is it that we're trying to do? The motion that was passed by the Board of Commissioners at a meeting previous to our meeting was pretty clear. It basically says that open use zoning meetings be postponed until the planning board has an opportunity to present alternative or an alternative to the Board of Commissioners. That was the motion that was made, seconded, and approved. So that's basically our charge. So what we need to do is to develop alternatives to open use zoning and to compare and contrast that with open use zoning. Some of this work has already been done by a previous subcommittee. And there's a document that Jason had handed out to us on that on their summary when they looked at industrial zoning and then other sorts of options they looked at, including extension of existing zoning, and I think there were one or two other options as well. The way I see this, and I'd certainly appreciate feedback from anyone, is it's really, in my mind, a three-step process. But part of that three-step process is there's some questions embedded in there. You know, clearly, our subcommittee has to do its work and report back to the full planning board for discussion and approval by the full planning board before anything moves on to the Board of Commissioners. And finally, step 3 would be the Board of Commissioners taking action on this, and they'd be required, of course, to have a formal public hearing as part of that action. My question is, at what points does it make sense to have the open informational meetings where, not a public hearing format where people just stand up and talk, but a chance to have interaction with folks who have thoughts and concerns and issues regarding the zoning issue? Is that something the subcommittee should do? Is that something the planning board should do? That's my question to you. What makes most sense? I mean, I could come up with an argument for either approach. For the, it makes sense because the subcommittee is the first step to start gathering that information, but at the same time, we want a situation where the full planning board has an opportunity to participate in that.
I think what your subcommittee needs to do is make a recommendation back to us, and we'll, as a whole board, decide whether we would hold those kind of things or not. I don't want subcommittees going out loose. It may get us all in trouble.
That's exactly my concern. Yeah. My preference would be to have it a full planning board activity. Right.
So you bring back to us a recommendation from your committee, and we'll consider that and decide what we might try to do.
So we'll get.
Well, we got some input here tonight. I mean, and I would expect we will in subsequent meetings as well.
We had a good turnout at my meeting.
Yeah.
We had
a good turnout here tonight.
Well, we actually even had more.
Yeah, we had over 2 dozen people there.
I think I counted.
Because you guys are very popular.
I counted 26 or something. Is that right? I mean, it's about something like that.
About what I.
So it was, a lot of folks are interested.
Plus, we had the mustache winner there too. The cattleman's mustache winner, he was there too.
Sam Rose.
It's not every subcommittee that has that honor.
See, you guys are such lovable creatures that these people all came.
We were very popular. I mean, your committee really didn't have that kind of popularity.
We just don't have the same thing.
Well, consider the swords. Anyway.
Okay, so we'll.
Sorry to interrupt, yeah, we'll work on that, yeah.
We'll come back with a recommendation at our next meeting.
Well, but we're calling that subcommittee the interim zoning subcommittee, which may be.
I haven't called it the interim.
Yeah, so maybe
I have not called it that.
All right, so let's not call it that.
It's really, if you look at the charge of the subcommittee, it's alternate proposals to open use zoning. That's our charge, and that's really what it is. That's a long name for a committee, but that's what our scope is. And
what are the alternatives to that?
I don't know who termed it interim zoning. It wasn't there.
Well, I was going to say, is that even appropriate? Because one of the things the subcommittee came up last year was that you had the 4 options, as you mentioned, George. You had 3 options to do something, and actually the 4th option, and this goes to how the current plan applies to it, is to not do anything to the zoned area and still go on with the land use plan.
Right, I mean, our job is to develop.
That's clearly an option.
Yeah, our job is to develop alternatives, and we probably should develop more than one, and we should list the pros and cons of each one for the Board of Commissioners to consider. I mean, that's what I view our job to be.
I think too, George, we need to have some concentration here on what happens if we don't do anything. We have a question here. I mean, do we, where do we go from here? We got, people pushing on us about trying to outlaw coal ash storage. But we can't do that if we don't have some means to do it, and so on. So, tell us what those downsides are.
That's exactly what I would view our charge to be.
We explore those four options, we need to know what those four
So,
options are.
What are the pros and cons?
So it's possible that one of the recommendations could be, don't do any zoning now, do a comprehensive land use plan, then revisit zoning if needed. That could be a recommendation.
That's entirely a.
That would be one of the things that we'll talk about.
Excuse me, could you define open use zoning? You said that the name should be open use zoning?
No, I didn't say that.
What was it that you said? I'm trying to
I
understand.
said alternatives to open use zoning.
Okay, what does,
what is
would help me understand.
Well, last year, the Board of Commissioners had a list of things on, there were four of them. One was to do nothing, one was to have open use zoning, one was to have industrial zoning, and another was to have a full-blown county zoning. And at that time, they were talking about the open use plan as being the best option. Now they're saying, no, we want to look at it a little further, and you guys explore the options here to that, and what are the alternatives to open use zoning.
Thank you.
So that's where we are.
But if I may, the rationale for that was there several of the commissioners at the time we really didn't want zoning at all in the unzoned portions. However, some things came up and lots of folks from the community said, we need some kind of zoning so that you can't put a firing range next to our property. That's where that came from. So we said, look, if we're going to do anything, we want to do something that's the least restrictive in the smallest areas possible, where this one may say no gun ranges, this one may say no something else, and whatever. But then we were very clear, none of that would happen unless and until the community said that's what they wanted. And then that's when we planned those community meetings. So that's the rationale for the open use. We were hoping that was the least restrictive way to protect it.
My first blip was a proposal for a quarry south of Ghost. And then the next thing was a gun range over on, what is it, 87, right? And another was 2 rock quarries off of Reeves Chapel. I mean, and next was dumping coal ash, and another was fracking, and so all these things kept piling up, and so
that's when we decided, let's see if now those folks that didn't want zoning before, let's see if they do. And in no way was a decision made that we were going to do anything.
There's there's a significant difference between open use and traditional. Open use is what they call a quasi-judicial process. So I don't know if you've been to the board meeting, but here come the lawyers, big thick books, expert testimony, citizen gets up, no, you're not an expert in that field. Maybe if they happen to be talking about forestry, you get to say something. Now, traditional zoning is the citizens get a chance to talk. So that's the biggest drawback to open use, is it excludes input from the guy living down the road.
But again, that was the point. We didn't know if we wanted open use. We wanted to get out to the community, tell them the pros and cons, and see if they wanted it.
Well, I knew those didn't want it.
Those meetings are no longer on the schedule.
Let's get the rest of the report here. All right.
Sorry.
What else, George?
Okay, we did talk about a couple things. Jason put up about 1,050 maps, which he went over very carefully, that gave the committee a pretty good sense of of what maps exist for the county, where zoning exists along our major corridors, where it exists in different parts of the county, where the lines were, where Pittsboro and Siler City have their own zoning jurisdictions, and where their extraterritorial jurisdictions are. So, you know, that's stuff that either Pittsboro or Siler City does, or in the case of Cary, what Cary does. And that's not part of what we do as a planning board. They have their own planning boards, they have their own decision-making tools that they use to make decisions on development. We did briefly talk, very briefly, about whether or not anyone was interested in looking at a moratorium on anything until the land use plan was done or any decision was made on alternatives to open zoning by the Board of Commissioners. There was no interest in that from committee members, and so that is off the table. There's just too many unintended consequences when you enact a moratorium. We did talk some about the fact that the unzoned area of Chatham County already is subject to a wide number of ordinances. For example, a subdivision ordinance, the watershed ordinance, stream buffers, junkyard ordinance, stormwater, soil erosion, sedimentation control, lighting ordinance, noise ordinance, as Jason mentioned earlier, is not part of that in terms of land use plan. So the unzoned part of the county is already subject to to those regulations by county government. Interim zoning was talked about somewhat. There was an article by David Owens that said in cases where no zoning exists, interim zoning may be an appropriate way to go, and he went through that. We distributed that paper to the folks on the subcommittee and made it available to anyone else who wanted it. We did talk about some of the issues that would arise out of an interim zoning approach. One, it would require mapping of existing businesses so that they could be grandfathered in. We had some discussion about if there were interim zoning, would it be agricultural or residential. It seems like the ag is preferable, but we're very early on in our discussions, and Jason helped us with our thought process with that for a number of reasons, partly because farming activities are exempt and not covered by the zoning ordinances, along with the wide array of secondary businesses that farmers usually conduct to make ends meet when things are not so going so great with their primary farming activity. And so it would require a complete listing of secondary businesses. And we'd have to work with the agricultural community to make sure that that did in fact happen. We did not discuss a timetable. I wanted to wait till I get feedback from after this meeting to try to develop a timetable. We will try to do that at the next meeting. Clearly there's going to be an iterative process, and we have to work out how we're going to do that in terms of the planning board, citizen input. Again, the Board of Commissioners ultimately would have to have a formal public hearing on it, but it seems to me, and it would be my recommendation, but this is not a recommendation from the subcommittee at this point, that we have open, very interactive meetings with the folks that would be affected by any recommendations that we come up with, and to do that multiple times, but through the full planning board, not through the subcommittee. I will try and at the next meeting allow, if we have a large turnout again, a period of time where people can make public comments to us. And see how that goes. I think a lot of people wanted to do that last time, but we were just trying to lay out the groundwork of what our charge was at that point in time. So I think we will try to do that at the next meeting. We'll have a defined period of time, and if we don't use it all, it's great. It's great too if we use it all. So that's where we are, Mr. Chair, planning board members.
We need to remember we are a public body, and every citizen in Chatham County is welcome to come and talk, and we need to listen. That's what we do. So, you know, if they show up to your subcommittee meeting, you listen to what they say. We will. Any questions for George? Okay, you too have a lot of work to do.
Yes, we do, but we at least get started.
Okay, all right.
DJ, I've got one comment, I guess, on the subcommittee, the titles of the subcommittees. That came from the email when you formed the subcommittees previously. If you want to change the wording of the description, I'm fine with that. But we're just using what you had sent out in the email previously for the notifications, but I'm certainly open. If y'all want to change it, that's fine. We can certainly do that, but it does help the public to know there's two different subcommittees.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a work in progress, and so, you know, maybe we ought to, you know, we ought to grow with the subcommittee.
Is there any problem with using the charge we're given by the commissioners, alternatives for open use zoning?
So that came from the commissioners.
No, that's what Chad called.
That was their wording.
Are you okay with that change, BJ? And I'll just, we can change the wording.
Oh, the alternatives.
Let's don't get crossways with the board of commissioners yet, anyway.
The only other thing I would point out is, because we had gotten so many requests, I think I've emailed everybody, but we had received some of your requests from the meeting last week. We've been posting all the documents from the meetings on the FTP site. And we've got linked on the main planning page. You just click on that link and then it takes you to a folder that you can go to the subcommittee pages. And then we'll post documents that are handed out of those meetings on the site. But I'll go ahead and I'll change the wording on the description.
So you posted the stuff that I gave you, like from David Owens and things like that?
Everything on the, and I'll change the window zoning to alternatives to open use.
I mean, that's off the main planning page, is that right, Jason?
That's right, if you go to the main planning page, you have the link.
I'm with Gene Bailey, let's put out as much information as we can.
And I'm just posting everything by the meeting, so I've already created the folder for like the March meeting, but there's nothing in there. So after that meeting, we'll post everything, and then everything from last week's meetings there, as well as from the open, the ladies.
Our next meeting is March 17th.
Right.
Jim's next meeting is March 18th.
That's right.
I think there's been, so they're back to back. But I think there's been a little bit of confusion among folks. Some who I've talked to, that they didn't realize there were two committees, and it's the 17th or 18th. I said, it's on board.
Well, that week, March 16th is the commissioners meeting, the 17th is going to be the alternatives to open use, and then the 18th is the land use or comprehensive plan. And we do want to change the land use plan subcommittee just to the comprehensive plan.
I don't know that there's much confusion about that.
Okay. We'll leave that one as is. I did not post the draft minutes. Well, I've not posted those. Once you adopt the minutes from the subcommittees, I'll post
Did you
them.
get those, George?
What?
Did you get my notes?
No.
Yeah, I thought
I
maybe.
emailed them.
This copy.
I emailed them out. So
Yeah, they were in my. I was wondering when you started going over and what we talked about it, you had
you not get them either?
I got it,
You
yeah.
didn't get them? Okay.
Cecil has a closing question.
Just for clarification.
I emailed it to you, but, so I emailed it, no.
Now, as far as stakeholders, now what are we saying now? If there's some stakeholders that want to serve on the subcommittee, what is the process again?
Tell us, they let us know.
Who will let us know?
They.
Oh, okay.
You or they, or, we need somebody who's interested in serving and will get to work.
They contact
We don't
staff?
we don't want somebody to go put their name on there and then not show up.
They contact staff, or who do they contact?
Contact them.
Well, if somebody wants to serve, you prefer the route to the subcommittee chairs, or?
What we're looking for is someone from District 5. That's what we're looking for. That's why I've contacted Tim Connaught and
Yeah,
what's our
Teddy.
preferred, yeah, I mean,
Let's let both hands know each time. I mean, Jason needs to know, and the subcommittee chair needs to know. Okay? I mean, let's don't have left hand not knowing what right hand. I mean, we have enough of that.
And who decides whether they can serve or not? Who makes that decision? The chair, or the board, or if they want to serve, they automatically own it,
No,
or what?
up to this point, it's been the chair of the subcommittee.
Okay.
So
They've been charged with getting it.
All right. I just want to be clear on that. That's all. I'm just asking for clarification.
We just need some folks. All right, anything else?
location of the next meetings? You gave us the time, the dates, but not location.
Yeah, they're on the calendar, the March 17th meeting for the zoning subcommittee is gonna be at the same place as last time. It'll be at the library here in Pittsburgh in the Holmes meeting room. The meeting on the 18th, which starts at 3 o'clock, which is the land use plan subcommittee, will be in this room. And those are on the calendar, which is online on the county website as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is this room available for my meeting?
No, I checked for the classroom as well as this room, and it's not, but I do have the speaker. I've met with Sam today, and I'm gonna get his mic, and he's got a 2-speaker deal with 2 mics.
Or a hearing problem.
Yeah, I've got that set up, so it's reserved for the 17th.
If you're a library.
Yeah. It's
The heating unit.
The heating unit's on, it just, it's.
My wife's in a book club there. She complains
They're
about
trying to
hearing all
kick us
that.
out.
Wrong with it. All right. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.